Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning out there in California. And I think everybody else has just gone noontime. Oh, yeah, Catherine's in the afternoon now. So, I mean, got people from all over today coming, which is really exciting. I'm really honored to be here with everyone on this journey as we start a new journey and kind of building on the past, right? It's just like kind of more layers. We've done the series on the Yoga Sutras, on the yamas and the niyamas. We've explored love from a different perspective, from kind of more of a racial and academic when we worked with bell hooks. That whole realm, that was a great series. Then we've kind of migrated into Tara Brach and her really extraordinary, I think, exploration of radical acceptance. One of the best teaching tools I've ever worked with is that book, and so I'm just really grateful we got to spend a couple months, 2 or 3 months working with her and her teachings from the Buddhist realm, and now there's a sort of circling back, and I love this aspect of the spiritual path. This kind of sense of circling back, of starting again. This happens over and over in the spiritual journey, where we kind of make some progress, and then we kind of get sort of like tenuous. There's a sort of usually like a crash of some sort, and then we kind of start again. There was my teacher, Vipassana teacher, Goenka. He was kind of famous for saying this: start again, because you just kind of keep feeling yourself stumbling, right? You kind of make some progress, and then you trip up and you sort of fall, and you're like, oh, how did I end up here? It's like, I thought I was making progress, and then we just start again. Like, of course, we're these human beings. We're on this journey, and we're gonna make mistakes, or we're gonna misinterpret. We're gonna, it's not a linear path, and we just have to acknowledge that, and we have to kind of accept that we are going to have moments of really like bliss and insight and clarity and a sense of oneness. And then we're also going to have the times where it just feels like it's all falling apart, and it's like, how did I get here, and why am I not enlightened yet? So I love this chance to go back to one of my source teachers. As most of you know, I did my first teacher training at Kripalu. I did that back in 2006. But I'd been practicing yoga for quite a long time before then. And by that time, Amrit Desai he'd been gone from Kripalu for over a decade. And most of you know that he left Kripalu not in the greatest of ways. He had a falling out of some significance, which we can go into at some point, because it does. It's not that it doesn't matter to this, because it does actually matter to the notion of love and relationships. But it's not important right at this moment. Right at this moment, what we're doing is focusing on the teacher, and the teacher really is an extraordinary teacher. He really is one of the most, I think, important teachers certainly in Western spirituality in the 20th century. I mean, he is definitely, and even now, he's still teaching. He's in his 90s. He lives down in Florida. And he still teaches regularly, and so he really helped to form, along with some other really great teachers, also of whom had their falls from grace. And and it's not just the male teachers. The male teachers are, I think, more prone to their control issues and other issues that they have, which we can talk about. But there are women teachers too, who, again, can be wonderful teachers, really extraordinarily talented, and I would say semi-enlightened teachers, right? Really, and yet their human frailties, their human ego, their human control issues, they're still playing out. As I've said before, I have yet to meet what I would consider a fully realized being. Someone whose ego is just not evident at all, right? However, I have met and had the privilege of being around some that were well along the way and that were just so thoughtful and considerate in many, many circumstances, in many, many challenges, and who often, and I think Amrit is one of these, who can be reflective about their falls from grace, right? Who can acknowledge that they made mistakes and that they got caught up in something in which their fears or their ego kind of took over, and kind of just, then you have to deal with those consequences, right? Okay, yoga is. So one of my teachers said, how do you put it? Yoga is living with the consequences of being our genuine self. And I think when I first heard that from him, I really had a bad reaction. I was not happy about that teaching at all. I said, no, there's no way I want to live with the consequences of my genuine self. But as I have learned since then, that was actually, I got that teaching at that 2006 first training at Kripalu by a teacher named Devarshi, Stephen Hartman, another great man, great teacher. He said that to me, and I really looked at him and I wanted to just like punch him in the face. I was like, oh no, I have no interest in that. And so, I've been on the journey. Here we are, we're still there, and I'm still living with the consequences of being my genuine self, or at least trying to be as authentic as I can, and yet not be too distasteful. Try to still have friends, and so here we are on this journey. And the other part of this that I really like is some of you are familiar, at least to some extent. Back about 5 years ago in 2018, I developed this whole sort of workshop series on intimacy now, on basically how do we experience intimacy right now, right? Like rather than everything we need to do to make intimacy happen, how do we experience it in our present lives, in our present moment, in our present relationships? Most of us, again, try to sort of set everything up like, well, okay, if I get this type of person and I have this job and I have this house and, and I have all these things in place, then I can relax and be intimate. Good luck with that. And so I try to develop this whole kind of course on how do we experience it more often in our day-to-day life with the vicissitudes and with the imperfections and with the disagreements and all that sort of stuff that are going on. Well, the primary inspiration for that was this book. And so I've had this book for about, I would say a little over a decade. I think I got it in 2012 when I was down at where Amrit teaches in Florida. And so mine's pretty tattered. It's got little things in it here. And so it's been a great resource for me. Before we get started, again, want to kind of just go over some ideas about how to get the most out of this and how you can hopefully benefit the most from this experience. One is, we just came off, again, a really good experience with Tara Brach. So for those of you who are following along and going on, this is going to be different, right? This book is very different. It's way smaller, right? And as I've read through it again, started reading through it again, it's written very differently than Tara's book. Tara has a much better narrative in her book. She's a better writer, actually. And so she has a better kind of narrative as she goes through the story. You can kind of follow the storyline easier. This is more like a sort of little teaching manual. What he does is just keep throwing out these teachings, and they're not necessarily a sequitur. They're kind of like, oh, here's a teaching. They sort of follow along with the subject matter at hand, but sometimes you can get a little bit lost in what he's saying. And this reminds me a little bit of the Yoga Sutras. Remember when we did the Yoga Sutras? For those of you, some of you were here when we did Yoga Sutras a couple years ago. A lot of the Yoga Sutras, you're like reading them going, I have no idea what they're talking about. None, zero. And that's okay. You're just letting the teaching flow over you. You're letting it just kind of land today. And little pieces of it will land today in this moment. And other pieces will just kind of go by. But it'll all kind of like start to, it's like almost like gardening the soil or cultivating the soil of a garden, right? We're just getting this information in there. What you need today, you'll take with you. What you don't need will still be there when you go back. But there's a lot of really, really good stuff in here. And again, some of it will make more sense than others at this time. But just try not to get into too much of a intellectual mode as we go through this. Like, oh, what did he mean by this? And what did he mean by that? Because you could just get lost in that. Doesn't mean we shouldn't ask questions. Okay, so when we have the space at the end of class, that's a great time to ask questions. Great time to say, well, I'm not sure what he meant by this. Can we talk about that for a moment? Or some other question. So it's definitely okay to ask questions, but try not to get too caught up in understanding everything. He has packed in a lot of his life teaching into this little book, which is, less than 100 pages, I think, and so we're just not going to get it all in this one swath through. Just as with any great teacher, you're not going to get everything in one swath through. And so don't get too caught up in the intellectual aspect of it. Definitely, as we go through, feel free to write down your questions, if you get a chance to read the chapter beforehand. We'll probably go about a chapter a week. Sometimes I go 2 weeks on a chapter if I really think it's particularly juicy, but usually about a chapter a week. And if there's something that's coming up for you, you can always email me too. So you can email me either before, after the class, anytime, and say, hey, what was this all about? And I will either answer it online, or I might bring it back into class and use it as a teaching in class. As all of you know, these are also going to be up on the website, on the video library. So that will be available for you as well to watch these at another time or just listen to them. I honestly, and maybe this is a little conceited of me, I like listening to these things. I don't necessarily watch myself again. Sometimes I do just for kind of editorial reasons, but I do like listening to them. I like listening to the meditations, and I like listening to just, did I make sense? Which I'm feeling like I'm getting better at this. So, but that's another way of just experiencing this. It's just to kind of put it on in the background while you're cooking a meal or washing the dishes or something like that, and just try to absorb it that way. We have a meditation, as you know, those of you who've been here before. We do a meditation to kind of do two things. One is to synthesize the material. Like I try to create a meditation which is in line with what we're studying this time or what we're reading this time, but also to set ourselves up for absorption, right? So we're trying to, again, get the mind to calm down, get it to calm down, get kind of an open lake, like a placid lake. That's the intention of the meditation, ultimately. Stuff might come up along the way, probably will, but we're going to just try to get that lake to calm down. And then we just drop in these teachings, right? Do the reading afterwards. And it's, again, you're not meant to sort of like, oh, I need to figure out everything he's talking about right now. You're just trying to open yourself up to the teaching. Allow the teaching to just drop in. Like, okay, all right, take me. All right, take me. Yeah. Did I ever tell you this story? I'll tell it to you because it's kind of funny. So I'm at Kripalu, and I'm going through one of these sort of existential times in my life, not sure what I'm doing. And so I go for a swim I go for a swim out into the lake. Now, it's a big lake at Apollo. It's pretty big, and I'm a reasonably good swimmer, but I wouldn't say I'm super confident at swimming. Talked about that before in some of my teaching. But so I swim way out into the middle of this lake, and then I'm just floating out there like this. And I'm kind of like feeling like, okay, what am I supposed to do? Well, you know, if this is it, then maybe I should just get a really bad stomach cramp right now, and I'll just drown. And I was actually kind of okay with that at the moment. I was like, well, okay, maybe this is it. You know, I'm out here in the middle of the lake, and literally I get this voice that comes to me after a while of doing this, and it says, "Swim back to the shore, stupid." So I turn around and I swim back in. You know, that was the lesson for the day. Swim back to the shore, stupid. So, in any case, here I am. I'm still here. That was quite a while ago, that experience. Let me see if there's anything else before we get started. So this first chapter kind of dives into a couple of themes that really are sort of setting ourselves up for the work of how we create loving relationships. First, we have to realize how we don't create them, right? How we create sort of the kind of hell realms in our lives, how we create semi-functional to dysfunctional relationships, how we tend to repeat patterns in our life. So this first chapter is kind of like unpacking our stuff a little bit, and that can be unpleasant. So, you know, kind of, I wouldn't take this first chapter as, oh, it's all going to be like this, because it's not. There's some other really nice stuff. But kind of like Tara did in her first chapter of her book, it's kind of like, yeah, I'm going to throw you into the deep end of the pool here. We're going to look at this stuff, and it's probably not going to be that pretty. So just take it as like we're looking at our needs, our expectations, and how we react to those things, right? So we all have these needs. Everybody has needs, right? We have needs for food and shelter and sort of comfort and sort of learning and aliveness. These are all real needs, okay? We all need these things. And so those are kind of inalienable in a way. So we have needs for food and shelter and clothing and comforting, right? And we have learning, sort of aliveness. So these are things that, if we're lucky, in the first few years of our life, are just sort of provided for us, right? And I think most of us here have had the first few years of our life were reasonably well attended to. But then what happens is, and it's pretty young, 2-3 years old, we start getting conditioned, right? And we start getting this sort of like, both in terms of what we can expect, right? And then how we can get those needs met, right? So this is the kind of the formation, the socialization process. And everybody goes through this, and we start to learn, well, what can I reasonably expect in terms of food, shelter, clothing, comfort, affection, what can I reasonably expect, right? This gets conditioned on us by our parents mostly, and those close to us. And then it's like, well, how am I going to get those needs met? So usually we just try yelling and screaming as a 2-year-old, right? That works to a certain extent. And sometimes we continue on in life with yelling and screaming as a way of getting our needs met. But we often come up with little more clever ways, but most of it has to do with pleasing others, right? Most of the way we tend to get our needs met is by pleasing other people, right? Now, we also do manipulation, and we do all kinds of other ways of trying to get our needs met. But we can do meanness. I mean, there are other ways, but most of us here have learned by pleasing other people, which then means getting good grades in school and doing a good job and being nice to people and being helpful and all this kind of way. And we start then identifying with these roles. Like, I'm a good son, I'm a good daughter. I'm a good wife. I'm a good partner. I'm a good employee. I'm a good, right? Well, who defines the good, right? Again, society and our parents and the people around here. And we constantly are getting this feedback about whether we're good enough all the time. Okay, this becomes a bit of a nightmare, all right? And because we're caught now in this loop where we never really get to decide how our needs are going to be met and what our expectations really are, because they're constantly getting put onto us. So we usually, most of us spend almost everybody spends the first 30 to 40 years of their life just playing along with this game, right? Playing along with, okay, how do I fit in? 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 How do I get my needs met? How do I get my needs met? How do I get my needs met? Right? And then sometimes around 30 to 60, somewhere in there, we have some awakenings where it's like, okay, I'm doing all this stuff. How come I'm miserable? Okay. How come this isn't working out for me? Right? I'm playing along with this game as I've been told, and I am either low level to high level misery. No one is not miserable. Okay. Don't even think about it. I mean, we've talked about that everybody we know, for the most part, unless they've done a lot of work on themselves, is low level misery, right? And then it goes up from there. So here's the quandary that we're in, and we're going to kind of look a little bit more at that. And then how do we get free? How do we get free? How do we get free? That's what this is all about. How do we get free of this cycle and start to create relationships which are based more on who we really are, which are these aware, divine, eternal, already one with everything beings. So one, we have to start to cultivate that for ourselves, and then we start to respond from that place. So we start to actually figure out how to get much of these needs. I mean, we still need to get food. We still need to get shelter. We still, need to have relationships and things like that. But how those more intrinsic needs are getting met and how it shows up and whether we really need everything we think we need, as Lao Tzu said, if you want to be happy, simplify your life. Right? So we start to realize, I don't necessarily need to have these super complicated things going on in my life. It's, the more stuff you have, the more you got to take care of, right? So you think if I just get another thing or another vacation or whatever, I'll be happy. You start to realize that's just another part of the game, right? As we start to wake up. And sometimes those things will make you happy, but they always come at a cost too. Always. There's always something we have to do to make those things happen. So there's this rebalancing that goes on as we start to do this work, and we start to do this work with ourselves, and then we start to do it in satsang, we start to do it in community, and then we can also start to do it in our relationships. And one of the really cool things is we can do this unilaterally, meaning we don't need the other person to say, I'd like to have a spiritually open relationship with you, like a relationship in which we're trying to evolve together. That, maybe you're going to find that, which is great if we do, and we can work on that together. But oftentimes with some of the people who are already important in our life, like maybe family members and things like that, they're not going to go along with that game plan. That's okay. We can do it unilaterally. So this is the kind of beauty of it, is that we can work on our own stuff and our own triggers and all this stuff that I just talked about, noticing the expectations, noticing our triggers to those expectations, noticing all these things starts to get us free, And so this is the last is a quote near the end of the chapter. I've kind of paraphrased it. You are the creator. What you believe, what you think, you create. What you create, you become, in self-fulfilling, self-perpetuating dynamic, right? So this is, we have to start to take ownership, our ownership of the relationships that we have are our creation, right? we have a tendency to say, well, if only this person would be this way or be that way, and only if they, saw me better. But these are all reflections. Okay, these are all reflections of a deeper part of ourselves. And as we start to see ourselves better, as we start to know our worthiness better, we will start to create and nurture that with other relationships. And relationships that can't do that, people that can't do that, will they'll become another thing in our awareness. And there's some sadness in that, because sometimes these people are really meaningful to us in a lot of ways. But there isn't that we get through the heartbreak. And the beauty of it is we get through the heartbreak without abandoning. This is where the warrior analogy comes in. I mean, in yoga, there's all these warrior analogies, right? This is what they're talking about right here, is how do I stay? How do I not abandon my post, right? While the barrage of all this stuff is going on internally. This person is not showing up the way I want. What am I going to do about it? I am going to stay right here, and I'm going to allow this to pass through me, right? That's the warrior analogy. That's the whole story of the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is all about being on the battlefield, right? And how do we do our duty, do what we know we need to do, and let go of the fruits. Because most of us get conditioned along the way that if we do this, then we should get, right? I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with people around their relationships, and particularly if they're like in a romantic or a marriage relationship, and let's say, well, this person should do, and as soon as they say that, they're off, right? They're off on this story, right? This person loves me, so they should, right? Or they're married to me, so they should. And as soon as you're down that road, you're into a quagmire, right? And we've all done it. I've done it. Sometimes I want things from people that I love and that I care about, right? But that is my stuff. And this is super important to get a hold of. That is my stuff, okay? My stuff, my suffering. I would really like it if this person would show up this way. My problem, okay? This is really important, right? And doesn't mean we're not working with that person to try to see if there's compromise or something, but it's not blaming. And that's one of the big parts of this first chapter. This first chapter is how do we let go of blame? Because that is the hook that gets us into the suffering, is blaming other people, blaming anything, really, even blaming ourselves. We don't have to blame ourselves. Listen, we're all doing the best we can to get our needs met, right? But we've been conditioned, my notes say right here, we've been conditioned as to how to get those needs met, right? And we haven't realized that we can meet them in another way. But there's a whole other way of getting to peace and connection and aliveness, right? Those are these kind of three big pillars that I talk about in other realms. This is what we want. We want to feel peaceful. We want to feel connected. We want to feel alive, right? And turns out that we have a lot more volition in that, a lot more agency. That's the working out than we think. We often think like, oh, things out there have to show up the way I want them to in order for me to feel peaceful, connected, alive, right? Let's face it, all of us have that to some extent. We all do. Me too. And yet, if I really look closely, I realize that's a story that I've bought into. Okay, I've bought in, not that those needs aren't real, but the notion of how they're going to get met is a story that I've bought into. Those needs are real. Okay, I really believe that. Could be wrong, but I'm going with it for now. However, how we meet them is often been conditioned to us. And in many ways, it's a very controlling conspiracy, right? When we talk about conspiracy theories, is how to control people, right? Well, you make them believe that their needs are met outside of them, right? And then it's a constant struggle to try to meet these needs. So that's enough. I've given enough preamble for today. Let's do a meditation. And then we will see how much of this first chapter we can get to. As I said, the other part of this is I'm going to try to really keep these as close to an hour as possible. We'll follow up as best we can otherwise, so that everybody can move on with their Fridays, right? Okay, let's find an easy seated pose. Feeling the sit bones into the ground. Crown up towards the sky. Begin to breathe deeply through your nose into your belly. Letting the belly rise away from the spine on the inhale breath. Letting the belly fall back down towards the spine on the exhale. Inhale, chest rising, belly rising. Exhale, chest falls. Belly falls. Inhale, chest rises, belly rises. Exhale, chest falls. Belly falls. Soften the shoulders. Soften the face. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Soften. Allow. Inhale. Hold, engage, pull in and up. Exhale. Hold the breath out. Tuck the chin. Pull the belly, pull the base of the spine, pull inward towards the navel. Inhale. Hold. Chin lock, root lock, pull in and up towards the crown. Exhale. Hold the breath out. Tuck the chin, pull inward. Inhale. Hold. Engage. Pull. Exhale. Hold the breath out. Going inward. Inhale. Hold. Engage. Pull in and up. Base of the spine. Pelvis, belly, heart, throat, third eye, crown. Exhale. Hold the breath out. Going inward. Inhale. Hold. Engage. Pull. When you feel the need to release, release the breath out. Soften the shoulders. Soften the face. Lengthen the spine. Chin back, crown up, shoulders back and down. And just feel yourself dropping in. Notice the gentle rising and falling of the breath. Shoulders relax back, crown up, face relaxed. Gentle rising and falling of the breath. You can notice the sensation of the breath passing by the tip of the nostrils. The coolness of the breath on the way in. The relative warmth of the breath on the way out. Coolness on the way in. Warmth on the way out. Coolness on the way in. Warmth on the way out. Coolness on the way in. Warmth on the way out. Allow yourself to just drop in deeper. Noticing the sensations in the body, the sounds in the room, the thoughts floating by like clouds in the sky. And now for a few moments, go back to childhood. Allow yourself to go back. And try to recall a moment of betrayal. Sometime when you felt that someone maybe wasn't there for you in the way you thought they were or thought they were supposed to be. And the more meaningful the relationship, the better. So maybe with a parent or another adult who you counted on. Most of us have some recollection of this kind of fall from grace, where either a parent got angry with us for no reason or allowed us to stumble unnecessarily. Just allow yourself to remember that event for a moment. And it may be a little painful. That's okay, we won't be here long. Just remember that way you felt. Now maybe you felt a little dumbfounded, a little like, what was that all about? A little confused. Just empathize with that little child in their confusion, dismay. And now see if you can also see it from the perspective of the adult. See if you can see their confusion, their lack of mindfulness, maybe their pain that they were projecting advertently or inadvertently, maybe their jealousy. Something took them off. Someone who cared for you but was making a mistake, was not seeing clearly the stakes involved. And just hold both, the child and the adult, in a sense of loving kindness. You can see the child, you can see the adult playing out their dance of expectations, and hold it all in loving kindness and compassion and understanding of the imperfection of incarnation, of the egos, and hold this right in front of you. Imagine it in a white ball of light. And this white ball of light is sitting right in front of you. The child, the adult, the confusion, the sadness, the pain. And you're holding it all in a white ball of light, of compassion, of forgiveness. And now let that white ball of light just start to go up in front of you and up as though it's going up into the sky, getting smaller and smaller and smaller until it becomes like a star in the darkness of background. There's many other stars around it, and this is just one star, letting go of it up there into the beautiful mosaic of a night sky. Holding, making room for, making space for it all. The child, the adult, the child. Acknowledging and letting go. Acknowledging and letting go. Acknowledging and letting go. Just falling back into awareness for a few more breaths. That vast, spacious awareness, holding everything that comes through. I am the awareness of everything that arises. The thoughts, the emotions, stories, the sounds, the sensations, the judgments. I am the awareness of all that arises. Taking a deep inhale. Hold. Exhale. One more inhale. Hold. Exhale. So I'm just going to read some excerpts from this first chapter on the urge to merge. We think of the self-image as ourselves. We are too naive to realize the falsity of this impression. We have no ability to separate truth from fiction. The ego has needs. It makes demands. And when needs are not met, it leads to frustration, anger, resentment. We believe we are looking for love, but it is not love we seek. It is our ego trying to fill its insatiable void. It is at this juncture that the word love gets a bad name. The ego's hunger for more and more can never be satisfied, leaving us feeling confused and miserable. If we never reach the realization that we are not only individuals, but simultaneously part of the whole, we develop self-centered behaviors. This is natural and happens to all of us to a varying degree. In short, our self-image creates the world we live in. We exist in a fantasy world, not the real world. Distorted by our perceptions, our happiness morphs into sadness, loving becomes revenge, and satisfaction turns into expectations. With duality comes unconscious separation. This sense of the false self develops separateness from others as it acquires definitions, concepts, memories, and expectations of how life should be. Our immature emotions become a roller coaster of ups and downs, continually counteracted by their polar opposites. The expectations of the ego follow us into adulthood. Adults have the same I and mine as children, solidified over years through acquired associations from a collection of personal events, experiences, prejudices, and false perceptions. The I is needed to sustain the body. There is nothing wrong with it, but it is vastly misunderstood and overrated in terms of reliability. The mind is an extension of the body. The body would be incapable of exploring its potential without the facility of the mind. All experiences of pleasure and pain, comfort and discomfort are registered in the mind. This is nature's device. The mind can be our worst enemy or our closest friend. It is our choice to use the body and the mind as tools to explore both our human and spiritual potential. As we listen to the messages of the body, we must discern what it's really telling us, all the while remembering that the mind has a mind of its own. It is not beneath the mind to lie to us. In fact, it lies more often than not. The body, on the other hand, if we listen closely, never lies. The I that originally focused primarily on nurturance goes beyond the role and becomes deceptive. As we grow into adults, it uses the body and itself as objects of manipulation for pleasure seeking and pain avoidance. Pleasure nourishes, but pleasure seeking malnourishes. Pleasure seeking behavior leads to indulgence in attention getting through work, entertainment, food, sex. Protecting ourselves from pain builds the walls of separation higher and higher, preventing us from seeing what we need to see as evolutionary spiritual beings. There is no going back. Once we grow up, we can never return to childhood and get the same joy playing with old toys. Once the light of consciousness reveals that this world and all its promises are just toys of the ego, we can never go back. Often we unwittingly revive painful past experiences, bringing them into the present. Until we are conscious about them, we continually invite suffering into our lives, placing blame on the one who hurt us, both in the past and in the present. Essentially, we are allowing that person to hurt us again and again in the form of another. We are trapped in the pain that happened years ago. It is as sharp as if it happened yesterday. A new relationship, someone who invariably reminds us of the person from the past, is likely to reopen old wounds. There is no advancement or awareness until we learn to consciously let go of the past with all its blame and shame. The key to moving beyond is to let go of the blame. Blame is saying, he did this to me. And every time you say that, the unspoken completion of the statement is, I cannot do anything about it. Until you remove the blame, you cannot empower yourself to go beyond it. You have the faculty to recognize this fact, and change yourself. Nothing ever happens according to what we want, but that does not mean it can be solved by blame. Despite suffering and humiliation, Jesus never blamed anyone. His behavior led to ultimate freedom and victory. I started this thing because that's a questionable little assertion, but that's okay. We're going to move on from there. A mind that is colored by guilt, fear, and blame cannot figure things out. A mind afflicted by charged emotions and analysis only justifies. Justification is not figuring things out. You do not have to solve your problem logically or psychologically. The most direct route is to trust your higher consciousness. Every time such an issue comes up, make a conscious decision to let go of blame and guilt. When you do that, you do not continue to feed the problem, so it simply dies of starvation. All that is needed is for you to give it up. This is an important thing right here, about trusting in a higher consciousness. So we have to develop this higher consciousness in order to trust it and not be just responding again to blame and guilt, right? To all this other stuff that's going on. Our identity is based first upon safety and survival, and is guarded with the same instinctive fight and flight response that happens with a real threat to our existence. We are perpetually on high alert, with adrenaline flowing and the brain chemicals pouring into every cell to sustain self-image. This state becomes the state of mind we live in. Living in a perpetual high-stress situation ultimately damages our health, causing all manner of illness and disease. It is also responsible for flawed thinking and poor decision-making about relationships. I want to stop here for right now so we can move on. But this last point right here is really important, that we are so attached to what we think we are, right? Who we think we are, about these roles that we just talked about, plus even this whole body. You know, I told this story yesterday about forgetting to shave, and how there was a moment of consternation when I realized I had forgotten to shave. But it wasn't about how people would perceive me, how I really knew that they would perceive, because I don't think most people care, right? But it was just me, worried about me, my own sort of notion of how this body, because I'm identifying with this body, is showing up. Do you see the problem with that? Like, that's an important point, because whether I shave or not has got nothing to do with me, with who I am, with this awareness, right? Nothing, zero, right? Just like if you don't get, your hair cut or put your makeup on, like when you think about all those things in which we spend a huge amount of time showing up the way we think will be affable to other people, we realize it's a form of suffering when you think about it. We are just responding to the suffering, right? By doing more. And this is exhausting. This is what this last point is, that we spend so much time trying to show up in affable ways, right? That it is super stressful. And that stress is actually what takes us out of peace, which takes us out of connection, which takes us out of aliveness. We want peace, connection, aliveness, but we're doing almost constantly all these things to show up in ways which we think will be affable to other people, right? It's a total problem. And this is kind of how I want to end my talk today and open it up to you. Let's say for another 10 minutes for those who can stick on, to just make any comments about the beginning, what I said, what you found in the book. Please feel free to just unmute yourself and make any comments about how crazy I am or whatever.
Well, you're super crazy, so that's a given. Clarice, I can't see you. Are you on here?
Clarice is on here. If you put your screen on gallery, you'll be able to see it.
I only see three. Anyway, what we're just talking about is so funny, and I can't see you at this point, Clarice, but when Clarice and I ran into each other at Stop and Shop, a couple weeks ago, and it was the most joyous moment we had because we haven't met yet. And it was our first time. We always kept wondering, when are we going to meet each other? But the funny thing is, and we were just saying here, I don't go out and put makeup on and go out, when I'm going to the food store. I just go, and it is what it is. My dress code isn't all high end. It's just whatever I have. Oh, I gotta go. And here I'm running into someone I've never except seen here on Zoom. She looked beautiful, not, nothing fancy, but we both laughed. I said, Clarissa, if I'd known I was going to run into you, I would have put something nice on, put some makeup and lipstick and just earrings, just joking, because who we are, it's not necessary. It was just a fun joke, but it really doesn't matter when you're worried about what other people are going to see. When you said whether you shave or not, I'm here, and the only thing you can do is look at that person as if you are done up, and like, oh, I feel really good about myself. So what? I don't have makeup and I have crappy clothes and I look like crap or whatever. I didn't take time, and she just happened to look gorgeous. I wanted to take her scarf, but she didn't give it to me. So, but it really was a wonderful moment, Clarice. Right, one of the best, outstanding times, running into somebody and not worrying about what you're wearing, what you're looking at. Because I do know many people. It's very important that they look a certain way before they walk out the door. And I'm thinking that's a waste of time. But anyway, I'll shut up.
I want to make a quick comment on that. So you can see how this separates us from almost everybody, right? Because our filters are constantly like looking for the ego, amenable other people. So, we walk by homeless people or other things, and I'm not saying that we have to connect deeply with everybody, but everybody is us. That's the thing. That homeless person, that we don't want to admit that. We don't want to acknowledge this, okay? But everybody is us, okay? And so, but what our ego does is it puts these blinders on so that we only see the amenable, the affable. We're not seeing, and everything else isn't us, right? So everything else, only the things we like. This is what the ego does, and this is what ultimately causes us huge amounts of suffering, because we feel this separation. Mm-hmm. So that's a wonderful point. Thank you, Denise. Mm-hmm. Who else would like to?
Here you are.
Say something.
Clarice.
No, I'm good. I'm good today. I'm listening.
Oh.
Okay.
But oh no, back to our encounter. It was for me. I will never forget, because I was looking at you and I'm like, wait a minute. Who is this person? I know them. Where? How? What? And you were looking at me the same way. And it was.
Yeah. We came together and hugged.
I'll never forget the feeling. Because I've always wanted to meet you in person, and I never have. It's been a long time. And I thought, well, I wonder how that's ever going to happen. Well, God provided it that day. Anyway.
Yeah.
That's a super sweet story. Thank you for sharing it. Yeah. Anyone else want to add any comments or questions or anything that came up during either the meditation? The meditation, if you really went in there, could be pretty disturbing. But that's all kind of part of our practice, as you know by now, is being able to hold space for the uncomfortable. Getting okay with being uncomfortable is a big part of the spiritual journey. So we got to do it sometimes. So, Ani, something?
That meditation was really great and really powerful. So thank you. Super uncomfortable, but I love the idea of those stars and just putting that stuff, just releasing it. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Me too. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we all have that stuff. We all have these wounds. We're going to talk at some point about how committed we are to our wounds. I didn't mention that today, but we are super committed to these expectations, to these ways of getting our needs met, and to our wounds. Okay. And you can write that down if you want. Expectations, ways of getting our needs met, and our wounds. Okay, these are the things that hold us back from freedom, hold us back from truly loving relationships. Remember, loving relationships are ultimately about attention and acceptance. right? I am giving my attention and I am accepting what is showing up. That is love at the kind of highest level, I think. There's probably other higher levels as well, but it's one of the highest levels. And so, what holds us back from that? And it's our expectations, our ways of getting our needs met, and our wounds. That keeps us from being able to give unadulterated attention and acceptance to whatever is showing up. So, anyone else want to say anything before we close?
Yeah, I just wanted, you, in the beginning of your epistle, you started talking about immature emotions. I'm wondering if Amrit clarified that at any one point, and at what point do we, what are they, and how do they become transformed into more adult emotions?
Right.
Is it through experience?
Okay.
Education?
All right. You ready?
I was interested in that.
I think it's a good question. He mentions that, I think, in the context of he's talking about when I first started off the reading about childhood development, right? And so we have these sort of immature emotions, and then as we become adults. But the same issues can come up, like issues of jealousy, and competition, all these kind of things that make us feel like we're not okay, right? And that we need to kind of get our needs met through kind of competition and through manipulation and all these kind of things. So where I think we're going to talk more about how those things can create sort of these negative reactions, right? We start having these negative reactions that perpetuate the separation, that keep us from experiencing more love and openness and connection. So we will talk more about how our interpretation of reality leads to often certain emotions that then kind of self-perpetuate themselves. Remember, we are the creators. We are creating our universe, our life here. And so how we respond to things is kind of key. And how we respond to emotions as they come up is kind of key. And how we realize like some emotions really just aren't helpful for us. They're normal from a sort of childhood perspective and they're even normal from an adult perspective, but how we then interpret and work with them can be different as we start to get older. We'll talk more about this for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, unless there's something else that somebody wants to add that's kind of super important. All right, we've done this in just about an hour. I'm pretty proud of myself. So we're going to close up here, and then we'll start again on the second chapter of the Yoga of Relationships next week. Hopefully everybody can get the book by then, and just kind of, again, just take your time with it. I would not, there's a lot in here. Don't feel like you got to read the whole thing, but obviously you could read the whole thing pretty quickly, but just kind of go along at a comfortable pace with it. And I think that'll make the most of it. Let's bring our hands together. Take a deep inhale. Exhale with a sigh. Inhale. All that is sacred and divine in me bows to you and honors all that is sacred and divine in you. Namaste.